hello, and welcome to another podcast episode. This time, we're going to be talking about the draft. Not too much about the off season, though, of course, some of these things will kind of, tangle into the off season, which is kind of why they're winning or losing the draft. But for the most part, today's episode with the wonderful Mr. Read Option will be the winners and the losers of the Season 4 draft. Before we begin our winners and losers, I do want to state some fun little facts. We had 11 wide receivers in top 100 talent. They all fell. None of them were picked or I would say reached for. A lot of them fell way below the defined area that they were projected to go in. So a lot of steals for a lot of teams. For the day one picks, over 40 defenders were picked for day one, and just shy of 30, that'd be 29 offensive players were picked for day one. For day two, 46 defenders were picked, and of course, 50 offensive players were picked. Of course, for rounds 1 through 3, we had a high run of talented players. Only 21 players in day one had normal dev traits. Of course, that obviously means that 51 players were drafted were a star or better. So, as we can tell, a lot of owners have a lot of good eyes for talent, a lot of good scouting, of course, looking at the senior bowls and how everyone was performing and projecting. So, I personally would like to say that this is only improving the league for the eye of talent. There was not a lot of drops. I think there was one superstar for rounds 4 and 5. I do believe round 3 had one as well. And yeah, I think after that, it became a lot of who did what with the pick they had, what kind of talent they had, how did they better themselves, and whatnot. So, enough of my rambling now and the little mini fun facts. On to the top 5 winners and losers, and of course we have to start with the top 5 winners. Mr. Read Option, I will of course let you finally get some words in after I spoke for 3 days and a half. Go ahead and tell me, what are your thoughts on the biggest winner of them all?
I mean, the biggest winner, and I think everybody was noticing it during the draft, all of the owners in the NAGA Discord chat, the Austin Stars, the season 1 champs, didn't do too hot in season 2, and season 3 looked like they had a little spark of something, and they fully dedicated this draft to the air. I mean, wide receiver Jalen Bragg in round 1, elite talent. You got Daryl Usher in round 5, and a tight end, Sean Hutton, who fell all the way to pick 68, 30 spots below what he was projected. And then, of course, talking about the air, we're looking at the defensive side of things late in the draft, getting defensive backs Anthony Anglin and Ramon Bankston, a star dev. Both of those solid picks, but it would be obtuse of me not to, bring up Corey McClendon, pick 89, free safety. So you have 3 guys on each side of the ball in the air. Of course, if we're looking at ground game, Malik Towns, heck, he could even help out in the air. But with Teddy Welsh, offensive lineman in round 5, and KJ Hawkins, a nice little depth piece at running back to help out that backfield. And really, as the years go on, because they already have Randall Young being the young running back that he is, having KJ Hawkins help out as Terrence Flowers gets older, 35 years old. I mean, this might be his last season. So now you have another running back to bring that tandem to fruition. Austin just killed it with this draft, and I can see them potentially making a run for that trophy that they've been missing since season 1.
I absolutely agree with that one. And I mean, like you said, you got to start it off with their draft. I mean, with the first pick for them was Jalen Bragg, who, by the way, if nobody knew, he was a top 4 talent. He was projected to go number 4 overall. He fell all the way to 20, and Austin now has the heir apparent to Terrence Carroll, who, by the way, is only 30 years old. And Austin, of course, has him on contract for 3 more years. So this wide receiver duo could definitely tear it up. And like you said, a lot of going for air type of plays. They drafted seven star plus type players. They drafted one elite, one superstar, and then of course 5-star developed players. Only 2 normal developed players. However, I would like to point out that they drafted the left guard Teddy Welsh 81 spots below where he was projected. He was supposed to go number 35. That would be in the second round. So he got a major, major steal with that one. And then, of course, Anthony Anglin, the normal cornerback. Austin had 6 players fall to them, but they only reached for 3 of them. And kind of saying a reach is a bit of a stretch. Malik Towns, when you look at it, a superstar middle linebacker. Austin's drafting the KJ Hawkins, like you said, a star, only 9 spots ahead of where he was projected. And then, of course, with their round 7 pick, Ramon Bankston, a bit of a reach, but he is projected to be a star in the league. So, I mean, yeah, like you said, E, it was quite a draft. They really only Jesus, they stayed put, stayed pat, and let the players fall to them. They let the draft go as it went, reaching only for players they felt they wouldn't get another chance at, like a linebacker and, of course, a running back. And then everyone else outside of their final pick, they just let them fall to them 80 spots, 81 spots, 30 spots, 11, 16. I mean, if I were the division of Austin, I would be very scared of this draft class. And of course, it all comes down to how they're developed, of course, if they can win a couple games and get those points up. But as for now, I think they had the best bang for their buck with every single pick. Now, of course, then we have to talk about the next winner that we both have agreed on, and that would be Louisville. Of course, Mr. Read Option, I will let you start this one off. But before you do, I would like to say that Louisville, coming out of nowhere this offseason and just pulling on a general manager masterclass. So that is my 2 cents before, of course, I now let you take the floor.
Yeah, Louisville, the new owner, he goes by Matt. Matt has been a fantastic new owner this offseason, the one that Louisville so desperately needed. Has been making moves that I imagine we will tackle throughout the season, if not in this podcast episode. But getting Jordan Buford Jr. at number 3 was such a great pull for them to really head up that defensive backfield. But the rest of their picks, I mean, they only had 3 more picks. Carter Peterson, a star left guard. Kayvon Taylor, who fell 58 spots, a wide receiver who is a superstar in round 4, and then finishing up their draft class with a defensive tackle, Jack Cecil, out of Dayton. And right now, Louisville is looking like a top 10, if not top 5 team in the league, which is something that has never been able to be said about them. They now have former Raleigh quarterback Jake Britton at the helm with second, third year running back Scooter Wallace, with Jarvis Malone in the backfield. I mean, they have a solid wide receiver core. There's not a weak point that I can point out in this team. And I think that given the fact that what the rumored schedule is this season, they might have our first NAGA 10-0 run. I know I had high remarks for Austin, but I have even higher remarks for Louisville, bringing a challenge to their division and their conference, which for the past 2 seasons has been run by roughly the same 4 teams. So Louisville, given their drafts and their offseason moves, but especially their draft really, putting the icing on the cake, these guys are poised for success in season 4. Go ahead and send that one back to you, Cole. I imagine your opinion is pretty similar.
Oh, it's absolutely similar. I would look at the standings, of course, from last year before we jump into this draft review, and they're going from 3-7 to potentially a 7-3 team.
Yeah.
And the Central Division on top of that, by the way, might be the most competitive division unless Louisville and St. Louis are the only top heavyweights. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
So I would like to say that, yeah, this draft, although not a lot of players here, if you just look at their overall roster, right, through free agency of what they did, and this will be the only team really that has a major free agency impact before the draft, but that's what set them up for the draft, right? They traded picks away during the free agency period before free agency to kind of set themselves up with players. And yeah, like you said, Jordan Buford. Like, are you kidding me? Like for at number 3, that they were supposed to fall to Tucson, potentially to San Antonio, and instead he goes number 3 overall, and he's a superstar. He's an 80 overall player, and we also got to mention he drafted in the second round a 79 overall left guard, and in the fourth round he drafted a 79 overall player. So Louisville has definitely been doing a lot with the minimum picks they had. They did the most with the least. Only one normal player, obviously. They kind of split on reaching and, of course, having a player fall to them. Um, but when you look at Buford, I would say that's not really a reach. That's more of like a estimation of his true talent. So you've got like a perfect pick, 2 falls, and 1 reach because it was the 5th round, and he kind of probably wanted to get his best available player on his board before he closed up shop for that night. And yeah, I mean, you look at their offense for the players they have, the offense just fully loaded of talent. The defense probably not so much. But you know, when you look at it, you've got Darius Mobley, you've got Trey Edwards, and then you've got Jordan Buford backing those 2 guys up. So that's a lot of talent, in my opinion. I don't know. I would say that's a pretty good starting ones. Outside of that, though, they of course had their Carter Peterson, Kevon Taylor, which I mean, I think we all kind of thought was going to keep falling to the 5th, 6th, and 7th round, but they swept up and got him now. And of course, Taylor will be, I think that is the 6th spot on depth chart, but he's behind 2 players that are 5 years in and they haven't really developed. So I think within not even half a season, we'll see Kevon Taylor probably 4th. And then if he gets really lucky, probably 3rd. So I'll definitely add on top of all of that with my 2 cents that I think Louisville is going to potentially win the division. And I think they have a playoff spot in sight. And I think with this new general manager, I think they will be another force in the Atlantic. And I think Virginia Beach and I think St. Louis are going to have a lot on their hands. And of course, then, you know, as a side topic, whoever comes out of the Southeast. So, but those are the 2 unanimous, not really unanimous, but a common consensus winners. I think Austin is the unanimous consensus winner, but Louisville obviously being the second consensus one. From here, though, I will let you now go to your next best winner, Mr. Reed, and then I will go, and then we'll keep ping-ponging until we get to the final one.
Of course. Yeah, I have a team that nobody really expected anything out of this season. There's been a couple names floating around this offseason of teams that have either done nothing or aren't looking like they're going to amount to anything. And this team, hailing from a division that seems pretty dominated already, and the competition that is coming to their division is not from them. I'm talking about the Salt Lake City Cougars. The Salt Lake City Cougars are in a division with the Portland Grizzlies, which seems pretty dominated, and the Sacramento Express, formerly known as the Sacramento Capitals, have had a pretty killer offseason. But when it comes to the draft, Salt Lake City, I mean, they had about 10 picks, and they did not waste a single one of them. Zach Faulkner at linebacker in the first round. We have John Ludwig, offensive lineman, in the second. And then from there, I mean, Jonah Nix, another linebacker at that core, Reggie Armstead, a certified running back 3 in that backfield, Damian Myrick at defensive line, followed by Ben Trammell. We have Chris Ryan, the tight end from Rutgers. I think that's another tight end too. So I mean, with all these guys, Isaac Levi at quarterback, Derek Mackey at cornerback, and Michael Curry at his final pick, a star dev in the 7th round at linebacker. You have 3 linebackers and 2 defensive linemen, a quarterback, a tight end. All these guys are either already going to be starting or are right next up in line. Especially looking at the quarterback situation, Isaac Levi, he's either going to be quarterback 2 this season or next season. And I can see him becoming a great quarterback 1 fill in, especially if Reeves gets hurt. Um, Salt Lake City has a very low floor, but especially after this draft, I see them having a pretty high ceiling. I don't see them winning their division, but they at least are going to be able to exchange some punches and draw some blood from the competitors they have to face, not only in their division, but outside of their division. They're looking to face Wichita, Orlando, Iowa, and Austin. Definitely going to make those some pretty fair fights this season. Salt Lake City giving themselves great opportunities here with this draft. And although, the league is sleeping on them, I'd say that, you're going to be pretty surprised anytime you see Salt Lake City play. I think that they're going to do a lot better than we have previously anticipated. And I will pass this one back to you, Cole. Who do you have as your next winner?
So for me, I have a interesting pick. This one, it's a bit of a mix. It's going to be the Tucson Vipers. You've got a handful of reasons, right? They have drafted 10 plus players that were over 77 plus overall. They had 8 players fall to them. They did, of course, reach 7 times, but they also had 15 picks. So that all being said, they did a lot. They did a handful of things early. It was a lot of reaching early on in the draft up until the 3rd round. Then, of course, day 2, they only had 2 reaches. Lot of players falling to them. Of course, you got to start with Kenny McKenzie, the free safety, at 9. Then, of course, Ethan Harrelson, Kane Newman, the running back, DeMontre Thorne, Lawrence Howard, the star linebacker, followed by another star, Jordan Rainey, right tackle, followed by another star, Jonathan Buxton, the wide receiver. And, of course, that was a star in the middle of the 2nd round and a star at the beginning of the 3rd and towards the middle of the 3rd. So, I mean, they were just rattling picks off. Of course, their day 1 picks had showing 5 stars, 2 normals. Every single one of them, 76 or better. And if you take out the lone 76, Lawrence Howard, they had a 77, they had 177, and that is 5 78s. So, yeah, they drafted a lot of ready now talent across the board. And then came, of course, rounds 4, 5, and 6 for day 2. A lot of normal players. They ended up with a star at the end with Jay-Sean Trice. But again, they only reached for Matthew Lovejoy before every single player after that. Sam Wagner, Rontez Cornish, Logan Conover, Preston Hart, Josiah Fair. Apologies, not Josiah Fair. But the others, they all fell. And of course, those day 2 picks were followed with D end, left tackle, free safety, tight end, and wide receiver. So Tucson building something. It's a lot of depth, to be completely honest with you, for the 2nd day. But as far as day 1 goes, they couldn't have gotten more quality with quantity than they could have wanted, to be honest. Of course, you're looking at Kenny McKenzie as their free safety. He's going to be backing up the elite Alonzo Martin Jr., but if you think about it, just a couple more weeks into the season and he'll take over Raymond Brooks' job potentially, or he could even be the 3rd string cornerback. But outside of that, of course, they've got Ethan Harrelson, the tight end, who he's already a 2nd on the depth chart for tight ends, behind, of course, Sam Thornburg, their free agent tight end that they'd got. Kane Newman, one of the players that sort of rocketed up into projections after that senior game. He's 2nd on the depth chart, only behind Donovan Dickinson, beating out Cameron Perry day 1. And then, of course, we'll wrap this one up with his final 2 picks of DeMonte Thorne and Lawrence Howard, both defensive players. Of course, Howard is going to be the 3rd string outside linebacker. and Demontre Thorne going to be the fourth string cornerback. So it's a really great draft. Obviously, like I said, it's a lot of depth, but when you walk into a season and you have a Virginia Beach season 2 style season where you have a CVS receipt coming out every week with injuries, you kind of got to draft for talent and depth. So I think Tucson did a wonderful blend of these. Of course, the only players that did not get to start are due to free agency. And of course, obviously, day 2 being a lot of depth picks, but they did very, very well. So then we'll go ahead and we'll move on to my 4th pick, Virginia Beach. Obviously, another massive multi pick situation. They had 14 picks, 10 plus players with 76 plus overalls. They had no normal dev trait players until round 4. And I think when you look back at drafts and you look back at how players are developed, how players form, how they, of course, grow into their team, it really starts with the first day. And of course, obviously, the start of day 2 with round 4, of course. And that's exactly what Virginia Beach did. They've got Robbie Mays, the superstar outside linebacker, followed up with pick 22 of Jimmy Pitt, the superstar defensive tackle at 76 overall. Then they hit it off with a bang with CJ Peace, the star strong safety, followed by Bryce McDonald, the star left tackle. So you've already got a future depth piece there going on. Followed up with finally Jeremy Krause, the quarterback, for day 1. And then, of course, he started off his day 2 with not 2, not 4, but 6 fourth-round picks. And of course, within the 4th round, he started the 4th round very hot, just as before, with CJ Holmes, the star defensive end. Then, of course, he racked up a first normal dev trait for Jabari Gardner, Dive Boateng, Patrick Mac Jones, and then, of course, finishing it out with quarterback Sawyer Burchett, which, when you look at it, honestly, is going to be one of those situations of, he's the second guy in there, but at the same time, you kind of look at the talent ahead of him, and I think you've got, Jeremy Krause, but, and then when you look at it, you've got Sawyer Burchett on the practice squad, but he's 76 overall, but, he could definitely start ahead of Jeremy, but we've got that fantasy league coming up, so when you've got those players coming in and adjusting their stats and everything just from a value standpoint, it works out, and he'll, of course, get boosted above Jeremy Krause potentially, or Jeremy Krause will get boosted from that fantasy situation. We shall see there. Then, of course, the biggest one for Mr. E and the Virginia Beach Mariners was Jack Storm, as he was drafting a punter. Thought that was a pretty interesting one. And he is going to be their starting, as Evan Rawlings is going to be the second string, despite being the better overall. But of course, when you have a rookie, it's probably better to get him going and then upgrade him from there.
Yeah, good take on Virginia Beach and Tucson. I actually have them in my honorable mentions alongside Orlando as the 3 teams who have 10 plus picks in their arsenal that they got to burn, and both got to, supplement their already pretty decent squads, if not, great squads. So potential starters, definitely a lot of depth though for those guys. But my focus for my 2 ones to kind of cap my top 5 off were Albuquerque and Wichita, both of which had their fair share of elite superstar and star talent to really bolster their starting squads as opposed to being depth. Xavier Bolden in the 1st round for Albuquerque, Keontae Porter, a running back, in the 2nd, Jameel Hubbard and Brandon Hadley, a linebacker and a quarterback, both in the 3rd round. They had a nice plethora of depth picks past that. I mean, Alex Schramm at fullback definitely caught a lot of people off guard. No one was expecting Albuquerque to take another fullback, but they had a lot of great talent picks. Not going to let the other guys go unmentioned. Jamal Hilton, Creed Donald, a user prospect, Matthew Schenk, and Kevin McKinney. All those giving Albuquerque a much better chance to compete in their already very competitive division. And speaking of competitive, the Wichita Wranglers, after moving on from Kreutzer, their all-star quarterback, they have bolstered their running back room with Julian Forbes, superstar user prospect in the first round, followed by free safety Marquise Brinson, fullback yet again. Both these teams taking fullbacks. I think that maybe that's another reason why I have them in my top fives. They made bold decisions that may or may not pay off. Ronnie Williamson at defensive end, Amir Blakely at outside linebacker to apply pressure to the quarterbacks in their division, Isaiah Finney at receiver, Ethan Cummings at offensive lineman, Rakeem Boatwright outside linebacker, another star there in the 5th round, Adrian Henderson and Kevin Witherspoon defensive end and corner respectively. But a lot of those guys for both of these teams are automatic starters and are going to be big difference makers when it comes to what their play styles will be. I think Forbes for Wichita and Bolden for Albuquerque will really change how teams approach both of these guys. Wichita now going to be much more run heavy, given that is what they lacked last season. And Albuquerque really applying that pass rush. Maybe Bolden also plays a part in defending the pass alongside Jamal Hilton. So both these teams adding new elements, which is why I have them in my top 5 to close it out for my top 5 winners. And obviously, I mentioned those honorable mentions. Orlando, since I just mentioned them in passing, Tucson and Virginia Beach, you all already heard a nice in-depth piece about. But Orlando, I'll go ahead and give you their lineup. Vinny Knox, defensive end. Their only star that they drafted was in the first round. Everyone else was normal dev, but make no mistake, these guys are talented through and through, 75 overall or more, with the exception of Stefan Lindgren, James Worrell, and Ernie Shipp. But you have Mo Sewell at corner, Connor Doherty at right tackle, Trenton Battles outside linebacker, Lonnie Chamberlain-Smith out of TCU, the defensive back, followed by Kenton Handy, Stefan Lindgren, the fullback, another fullback taken in this draft. A lot of fullbacks. I guess this was a stacked class. James Worrell at D-back, Mason Bruce at kicker, Luke Kingston at defensive tackle, Jacoby Bracey, a late quarterback take. He is a user prospect who will likely see some playing time given Tremonti Geechee gets either benched or injured this season. We will see. I think we'll see a lot more Jacoby Bracey and then Ernie Shipp to close out their class. But a lot of these honorable mentions, getting a lot of guys outside of these winners. But I think what sets apart these winners from the honorable mentions is the impact it'll make. And it was kind of the approach I took, was the impact it'll make on their starting squads, as well as it'll change how their team will be approached and maybe their approach to other teams as well. And I'll send it back to Cole, potentially wrapping up the segment as well as the winners for today.
Absolutely. And I think you probably had it best as those two teams, because you see a lot of things that I don't, obviously. That's why you obviously have a lot of good picks versus, some of my, less stellar picks, more of a quantity over quality, mix of quality and quantity. But I'll go ahead and wrap this all up. Of course, I think it's sort of half draft, half what did you do with the pick you had? What value did you get for it? And for my final team, I'll have San Antonio. I think that obviously when you look at the draft, it wasn't exactly a major draft. It wasn't fully, 7 picks, all the way down the line, of star. But when you look at it, they, of course, got the number 3, best talent with BJ Black. And then, of course, they got Braxton Bowens, the cornerback, after, of course, Jordan Buford was taken. And then they went in the 3rd round, grabbed a star of Jarvis Brothers, followed it up with a round 5 pick of the tight end Michael Bruno, who will be now their 3rd string tight end. Then in the 6th round, they drafted a gem of a running back in Bobby Armour. And then, of course, round 7, they finished it all off with the obvious pick that I think everyone kind of saw coming with Isaiah Tucker from UTSA. and that was kind of their draft in a total. So off, kind of like, surface level, doesn't look like too much. They, of course, got, 2 top 10 talents and then kind of went where they needed to go. But when you look at what happened during it, they wound up trading a number 25 pick for a first-round pick next year. So already they doubled their value for the next following season, having lost their first-round pick to Portland because they traded them in a trade to Portland for Ryan Davis in exchange for their second-round left tackle and their quarterback. And then, of course, as we all have to note, San Antonio was not picking with any of their own picks for the first 3 picks. That's round 1 twice, pick 1 and 4, and then round 3 at pick 15. So they had house money, and I think they cashed it in, and they probably hit the lottery with 2 of these picks. And yeah, I think that would be my final pick for the winners. So we will go ahead and close this portion up. And of course, if anything needs to be edited, adjusted, we will go ahead and do that in the post after we get the next segment done another time. But until then, we will see you guys next time. And hopefully the next time we do this, it'll be for the preseason, and seeing who we can predict will be the winners of the regular season championship. But as for now, I think it'll be San Antonio and Virginia Beach again, unless you have a different opinion.
I think that we may see some surprises, but obviously, dynasties in this league are dynastying. They are definitely staying on top, and think that they will both make it back to the playoffs. But I do see that the division winners for the other divisions in the league, the other, 4 divisions, may see new number ones. And aside from Virginia Beach and San Antonio, the other 5 teams in each conference may be different when it comes time for playoffs. Definitely based off of these winners, I think Austin and Louisville will be joining those ranks. And I think I'll have some very different things to say about the losers when we cover those. A couple teams that have made playoffs that we may see miss this year. But that'll be for another time.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. So, all right, we'll be back. Welcome to the second part of this wonderful, wonderful podcast. But if I'm a good editor, like 2 seconds has passed. So this is one video. I don't know, maybe. We'll figure it out. But anyways, we're back for the top 5 losers of the draft. And once again, joined by the illustrious Mr. One Take E, or Mr. Read Option. I guess you could say Read E Option, quote unquote, E in the middle, nickname. I don't know. I'm stupid, so I butchered that. That's okay. So, let's get right down to it. This is going to be a probably, hopefully, not really, small segment. If we have more insight, we'll give you all the insight. But, these teams didn't do much, so there's not much to talk about besides how they didn't do much. But, all right, let's get the medicine over with for poor Mr. Nick. The Memphis Liberty. So they drafted Michael Billings, 6th overall. And as we referred back to the San Antonio top 5 in my winners, they traded their first-round pick for the number 25 pick and their best offensive lineman. And with that pick, they got Michael Billings, who his true talent was 245. And for anyone who, you don't really care to read how many picks there are, there's only 168. So even if he were to draft him in the 7th round, it would be a reach. By a million miles. But unfortunately for Nick, I believe this will be the biggest reach, unless, of course, Monty Baines is 245. But either way, now Memphis owns the one of the top 2 largest busts in NAGA history. He then, of course, followed up with a masterpiece. As I apologize, Billings was not the trade because I'm stupid. He traded up, I believe, for number 6 in the offseason with Tucson to get Michael Billings. So it still was a trade. So let's not forget this. So Tucson got free capital for this. So then at the start of the second round with the first pick, number 25 overall, is when they traded for San Antonio's pick. They got Malcolm Burris, who is a 74 overall, who was also a UDFA, undrafted free agent, true talent. So, yeah, the first 2 rounds that he didn't have picks in, he traded up to get picks in, and he whiffed horribly. I mean, awful. And then, of course, in the 6th round, he got Jake Whipple, the right tackle, his only good pick, and it was a gem. He fell to him. He was projected to go a lot higher, 76th overall. He went 144th overall. 68th overall. And yeah, so Memphis, I mean, just drafted 2 undrafted free agent talents and then lost their next year's first. And they got saved by a right tackle that fell to them in the 6th round. So that's about all I have to say. Mr. Reed, do you have any other input for this pick?
I'll preface what I'm about to say with, we're judging all in all how these teams drafted. The state of these teams we will add on as we did in the positive section as to how hopeful we are now about those teams because of their draft. Memphis, lucky for them, no matter how horribly they drafted, are likely still in a good scenario in their division. They're still in competition with Raleigh, Orlando, and Baton Rouge for first in their division. But now I will get into the meat and potatoes of this. This was the worst drafting performance I think we've ever seen from any owner. Last season, as Cole brought up, Monty Baines, who was the biggest reach by 276, which is just insane. Just absolutely insane by Delaware. But Delaware went on to draft Michael Bollinger in the 2nd round of last season, the superstar outside linebacker, and proceeded to have a pretty decent following with the rest of their picks, with the exception of another reach with DeAndre Callaway. But they redeemed themselves last season with the rest of their draft class. And as Cole mentioned, trading your best lineman and a pick to get Malcolm Burris, who is your 2nd reach in a row, combining for almost 400 reach to draft positions. That is unprecedented. And I don't even think, although Jake Whipple will be undoubtedly, a great prospect out of Notre Dame, I don't think his total score will ever be beaten as far as how terrible he did. And if we're just going to add salt to the wound, his 1st round pick that he got, he traded to get it. He gave away a 1st round pick that was his via Salt Lake City and his own 3rd round pick. So 2 for 1. And what Tucson did with those was get Kenny McKenzie, star free safety in the 1st round, and get Jonathan Buxton, the star wide receiver out of Baylor. So Tucson, and their performance, as mentioned previously in our winners, it kind of adds a little bit more sting to how just historically miserable this draft class is to the Memphis Liberty. And of course, they don't need this draft class like some of these guys I'm about to mention later in this very segment do. But, Memphis, the fact that they did this bad, you hope it doesn't carry through to the rest of their season, and they keep making flubs like this in their play calling and in all of their decision making. You hope that this is just a fluke in the day of Nick, the Memphis Liberty GM.
And I do want to also add on. So Memphis didn't have many draft picks, as we stated before, right? So get this, E. He only had 3 picks, right?
Yeah.
Every single pick that was not his, as I go ahead and refresh this once more, I think it was by, what is this? Yeah, this is Tucson. Albuquerque had 2. in Salt Lake City, and Sacramento. So he had quite the amount of picks. Of course, four of them were via other teams. And of course, the infamous 123 pick from Memphis, VB, OKC, Brooklyn, Virginia Beach, and Louisville. Crazy enough. Yeah, so he drafted and whiffed on 2 picks and had a right tackle fall. Kenny McKenzie, star. Ethan Harrelson, star. Zach Faulkner, star. Lawrence Howard, star. Jamal Hilton, cornerback, normal. Jonathan Buxton, wide receiver, star. And then from there, it was the 5th to 7th round. So, we don't really count those. But yeah, the picks he gave away, and of course, not to mention the 2 picks that he gave away for his 2 draft picks. Yeah, that's gotta hurt. That's gotta be salt in the wounds to see what the other teams did with your picks, and then when you go to draft, you wind up having the as you stated, the worst possible draft in NAGA history. So, I do believe our next team, as we move on from that, that is the medicine for Nick. Hopefully, he'll be able to digest that well with a division championship victory. That of his own division. I'm not saying that he'll go to the championship, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Yeah. We got to one step. You got to beat the other 3 guys after that type of a draft before you can get to the big team. So the next one, I think we both agreed, and if I recall this correctly, is Iowa.
Yes.
So this team, in my opinion, the way this kind of laid out the way it was, is because they had 2 7th round picks. And that was it. That's about, case, done right there. And it's funny because, they truly only got 1 UDFA in Colby Gorham, the outside linebacker from Fresno State, with the last pick of the draft. So it didn't really matter, at that point. And Jacob Kingston, who was true talent of 157, so they reached by 12, who was a left tackle from Western Michigan. Somehow, that is somehow a more positive draft than Memphis, but you only had 2 7th round picks and you didn't even get any developmental trait of it. So yeah, that's all I got on Iowa. So I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Reed.
Yeah, Iowa, if you take a look at their team, what they needed to do was really stack up on this draft. You have an aging Graham Hull as your quarterback. You have an aging Darius Rogers at your running back. And sure, you got Eureka Burns last season, but what did you do with them? You're looking at your wide receiver core, most of them over the age of 30. Some of them, their dev trait have regressed. You're looking at your tight ends, both over the age of 30. You're looking at your offensive line. You drafted one, they're a 3rd stringer to 2 30-plus-year-olds. It's really sad when you look at their linebacker core, their defensive back core. They in the past, in previous ownership, they like to tout how young their team was. And although the new owner did a great job of leading them to the playoffs, sacrificing the youth for experience, you still need some of that. You need a good balance at every position. You need to replace the guys that are leaving. You need to really, prepare yourself for the future as a team. And maybe they change the tempo in next season's draft. I don't think they've set themselves up for success this season by getting 2 end of draft picks that will never see the light of day on the field, especially in a division with the Columbus Senators and the Milwaukee Bees, with Joseph Abitangelo looking like he's ready to carve up the division this season. So yeah, Iowa, as Cole and I both have agreed, they really do take the cake here. Similarly, I'm going to bring up my next loser of the draft. I'm going to talk about the Omaha Spartans. Same division, same outcome. You have a lot of guys you got who simply aren't going to be starters, and some of which aren't even second string. The Omaha Spartans had a solid amount of picks, 7 picks total. six of them normal dev, all but two of them reaches by sometimes 50 or 60. So the IQ here wasn't the best. The wide receiver at the very end in round 7, Trevin Belton, was a nice little light at the end of the tunnel after drafting Lay Story, offensive lineman, at their first pick, the pick number 7 in the draft, and then just proceeding to draft nobodies that, similar to Iowa, and since they're sharing a division, I guess they'll get to share in their misery. They both will have a bunch of guys that likely will just go to free agency and chill out, maybe hop from practice squad to practice squad, aside from the two at the beginning and the end, and one of which, I mean, an offensive lineman being the highlight of your drafts. I mean, you better have a good quarterback to lead your team if you're going to try to protect them, unless you have, 78 overall Hudson Lowry helming your team. I think you got to worry about one thing at a time. I think Omaha really flubbed up this draft by picking not only poorly, but not picking to their strengths. They didn't pick what they needed to in this draft.
I can definitely agree to that. There's a lot of teams in here that you look at and they have needs, they have necessities, and they just can't get it. And I did have something pulled up, as I did want to add a quick note before I move to mine as well, about the Iowa pick, since they had dropped basically all of their picks. I believe it was, yes. So they went via all these teams. They gave to Virginia Beach 4 of them, who then gave to Tucson, Orlando twice, and Raleigh. And then Tucson via gave to Virginia Beach. Iowa gave to Memphis, who gave to Tucson. And I mean, they didn't really miss out too much. Superstar Robbie Mays was drafted with that Iowa pick, and Lawrence Howard with the Iowa pick. But outside of that, just a lot of players that people were either reaching on or just, kind of wasn't really all too great. So that was my additional 2 cents to staple on to E's incredible insight on that. And of course, we then move from E's talent of explaining to you why teams are the way they are and how they draft. And we move to me. So we'll figure out how I can explain this Milwaukee pick of all things. So Milwaukee is my third ranked team. And for me, it's pretty obvious. Out of their 6 draft picks that they have, they only drafted one player worth of any development, and that, of course, is David Chapman. He was 11th overall. He was true talent of 13, so it was a tiny bit of a reach, but in all, not really. 79 overall, he's going to back up the starter. But after that, it's Justin Eggers, 77 normal. William Slade II, 76 normal. Jeremiah Count, 75 overall, normal. Jalen Bradley, the quarterback who fell, who was true talent of 15, but just plummeted. So you can kind of say that that's a good thing, but as we all know, with prospects, they're normal. If someone leaves, it might not work out, stuff like that. So that's a bit of a, future down the road pick, risk and reward type of situation. And then, of course, they finish it out with another prospect of Gary the Snail, 79 normal. But no playmakers were added to this team. A lot of normal dev traits, nothing for the future, really. A lot of these players are going to be depth pieces at best, or they're going to be trade pieces centered around a possible rebuild. So that is my Milwaukee team. And of course, we're going to be doing 2 teams for me and then back to E to finish out before I finish my last one. So I'm going to be heading over to my 4th ranked one in Columbus. So Columbus is probably a bit overlooked because of where they are, their status as a team, where they're going to be heading to the future of the playoffs next season. But again, if you don't draft well, you're going to run into problems. You're going to run into cap space issues. You're going to run into issues of old players regressing too far back and no one able to take their spot with enough prep time for no fall off. So for Columbus, really no starters at all. I mean, almost none at all. They had 1 star developed player. They didn't have any picks in the first or second round, so there was really devoid of any true talent they could have grabbed anyways. But their first pick, Patrick Coughlin, the 75 overall middle linebacker, he is a star. But then they followed up with DeMonte Easter, who was 73 overall normal free safety. Yasir Osman, 76 overall normal left guard. These last 4 picks are all offensive linemen. And as I will state here, if you draft an offensive lineman and they are a normal dev, you better make sure that they are a 77 or higher, because anything less than that, you are more than likely not going to have them starting, and or they're going to perform horrible. So Columbus really flubbed on the back end of their draft. I understand why you want to go for, offensive linemen. It could have been a fall, and of course, technically they didn't reach on any of them. They all quote unquote fell to Columbus, but for a team as stacked as Columbus, you've really got to prioritize scouting players well and drafting them. So bit of an unfortunate draft for them. And of course, this is not on the owner, as they were, of course, away. So they did delegate their drafting duties to the league front office. But either way, that's the board they gave them. So it is still technically on the owner. Not really too much, because, they may have had a player they may have jumped the gun on, but at the same time, you gave them a board. So, yeah, I think Columbus in this instance, no starters really. Like 5 of your picks were all normal, and of course 4 of them were offensive linemen that won't start on any line except maybe Vancouver and Delaware. So that is my 4th rank, and I will head it back over to you, Mr. Reed.
And yeah, you mentioned Vancouver just in time. The Vancouver Mountaineers had a historically bad season this past season after being a playoff team in season 1, I want to say. Season 2, post expansion, Vancouver was able to go at 500, 4-4, but this past season going 1-9, having a miracle victory. You got to think the off season and the draft is crucial. And then they proceed to do very little in the offseason. They did get Orlando sensation Sean Fisher at their quarterback to take the place of rookie Troy Hall, well, now second-year quarterback Troy Hall. But if you look at this season's draft, it's not so much that these guys aren't going to be starters, because how bad their team is and how bad it's been looking this offseason, pretty much all these guys are going to be starters. Amar Coleman-Reed in round 2, Emmanuel Blackman in round 4, a wide receiver and defensive end, respectfully. They both will be great at their positions. You left yourself with only 6 draft picks to rebuild, did nothing in free agency, and with the 6 draft picks, you went 3 defensive linemen. And I think that might kill them, going one-dimensional. They went with a wide receiver, a middle linebacker, and a tight end with the other 3 picks. But going 3 defensive linemen when you really need to stack all your positions, they now have a lot of defensive linemen. And then, of course, the linebacker they drafted is not going to see light of day, period. The tight end they drafted is tight end 4 on their squad. They still have a generally middle-aged tight end, although all 3 of their tight ends contracts run out. So if they're postseason / preseason after season 4 is anything like it is this past season, maybe Casey McCarthy will see the light of day on the playing field for Vancouver. But, perhaps Sean Fisher will throw some dots to Amar Coleman-Reed. Perhaps we'll have Kenny Matlock, the newly acquired Vancouver running back, will be able to run behind their existing offensive line, which they did not bolster whatsoever in the offseason. But these guys are, if we're talking about improving situations or making things worse, these guys definitely did not improve. And, they may be in for an 0-10 season coming up. Bold prediction. But last but not least, I guess they are the least in the fact that they had the least amount of draft picks at 0. Oklahoma City. No clue what's going on there. New owner this past off season / late last season, Rico came in, almost led the team to the playoffs, and decided to trade away every draft pick they had. If you look at their squad, they have a good bit of youth. You understand from a certain point of view what they're going for. They already have enough youth. Why add more to it? But you have half your practice squad full. We see a lot of low 70s on your roster who are normal dev. Why not take a shot? Why not go ahead and at least have one draft pick? Give away some of your aging guys. Adrian Turner is 30 heading into this season at wide receiver. You have plenty there that are youthful. Why not try to draft another superstar wide receiver? You have Colton Davidson, who's 29 on your offensive line. You have a bunch of 30-plus-year-olds on your offensive line. I know the offensive line class was stacked heavy this draft. Why not go for one of them? I'll say nothing about their linebacker core. It is looking pretty solid. However, Tony Pickett and Tyrell Augustine's and Darian Thompson's joints can only take so much. These guys are getting up there. And I think although you have the youth, it still confuses me why you'd want no part in the draft whatsoever, given a lot of your guys are going to be at retirement age. You're going to be having at least 10 guys run out to contract. Given potential expansion next season, you don't want to have all your youth taken and then all of a sudden, you have no draft picks for next season. So definitely don't do this upcoming season what you did this season. Take part in the draft teams. It's never a good idea to leave yourself entirely broke when it comes to the drafts. Just ask the Rams what they've done since their Super Bowl.
Yeah, that has got to be the most poignant part of it all, right? You don't draft any talent, so as I will also staple onto your excellent commentary, yeah, a lot of 2-year and 1-year players left. There's very few 3 or 4-year contract players. So if not this draft, next draft, and for sure free agency, there's going to come a time, of course, where he's got this team set up to be super talented. Well, here's the problem when you get a super talented team like Virginia Beach, San Antonio, Portland, Memphis, and others. And Memphis had it just this offseason. They won a lot of money. So you've got a very, very, high-end talent team who are aging, and you've got some young talent in there, but once they hit that market, it's going to become way too expensive. The commissioner's already stated multiple times they will not be adjusting the cap. They are wanting to ensure that we work with a 160 cap, and we try not to inflate all these contracts to be ridiculous numbers. So for those teams who think you can simply draft high-end talent, not even draft high-end talent, sign high-end talent throughout the season, off-season and whatnot, sorry to say it to you, but there's going to come a time where they need that money. And if you don't draft young rookies on cheap contracts, it's just not going to work out. But I definitely agree with that. And I will move on to my final team. Of course, this owner will not agree with me, as the entire time during the draft and post-draft, they were talking about how they never missed in the draft, which is quite the bold statement because, let me tell you, the Raleigh Royals had quite a few picks to go, and they reached on every single pick. Not even joking. Like, every single pick they reached. Sure, you can say the 7th round was, a pretty close one, and the 3rd round was a pretty close one, but they reached on every single pick. They didn't let any player really fall to them. They drafted James Segal. That was a necessary pick for them. You almost kind of count that as a wash away for the pick because they had to. Then you go after that, and what do you get? Well, you get the star 75 overall Shahid Ahmed, strong safety. And then you followed up with a 77 left guard, 73 defensive end, 75 cornerback, 74 free safety. And of course, Dylan Goforth, 75 overall tight end. Now, this is also to be said that Raleigh drafted with none of their own picks. So the opposite of San Antonio, where they had house money and cashed in on all 3 picks that were not theirs, Raleigh did the opposite outside of the Tucson pick, because of course I do believe Raleigh did trade upwards to number 5. They did trade with Tucson before the draft during the offseason to get James Segal ahead of Memphis, which would have changed Memphis's entire trajectory. And we may not have been talking about it as bad as we did, but here we are. And Raleigh definitely did not set themselves up for success come the next following seasons, as I think, once again, as the other draft classes, all these players, minus James Segal and Shahid Ahmed, potentially, because the star dev trait, are all going to wind up being backups in the very near future, and this draft class will go down as a major, major wash. So that is my final ranking. Mr. Reed, did you have any other opinions on this draft?
I think that overall, we're bound to see the league shake up a good bit. I think that the teams that drafted well, more so than the teams that didn't draft well, are bound to make a difference, especially from last season to this season. If I'm going to call any shots, I think that we're going to see a lot better performance from Louisville this season. We're going to see a lot better performance from, although they might have messed up the draft a little bit, from Milwaukee, from Tucson, and from Sacramento and Salt Lake City. I see these teams doing at least better than they did this past season. I see more league parity. I don't think we'll have a 9-1 team or a 1-9 team this upcoming season, unlike this past season where we had 2 1-9 teams and a 9-1 team. You know, I'm thinking that we're going to see a lot more push and pull, a lot more exchanging of punches. You know, and I don't think we're going to see the end of dynasties necessarily, but I think if some of these teams continue on the trajectory that they're going, we might see some new ones form.
You know what? I was just about to say that I think outside of the couple teams that drafted well, the only 2 teams I could see possibly staying the same is going to be Vancouver and Delaware. But like you said, I mean, it's exactly as you said. There's going to be a lot more parity, hopefully. I think the biggest issue we've had in the league is the Midwest. Columbus, just the rich getting richer despite the horrible draft they had. But Iowa, you know, going into free agency, trying to get some players. Milwaukee having a middle-of-the-road draft. And, you know, of course, Omaha having something. So that's like the one division I think we can all look to hopefully one day correct itself. Now, I will also counter with this, Mr. E, is that I think Columbus is going to be in cap purgatory within the next 2 years. You're paying a wide receiver $10 million, so a 16th of your entire salary goes to one man. You've got a lot of high-end talent that's going to be due for contracts in the next 2 years. And even if it's not high-end talent, they're still going to be asking for more because you've won, right? So the more that teams win, the more players realize, hey, wait a minute, like I'm contributing to winning success. I need to be paid appropriately because we're winning games because of me. It's a team effort, and that means that I'm also doing well. So I would say, on top of that, I would say my guess is around the league, I think Louisville is going to give a run for the Central. I think Orlando has a dark horse shot to get the Southeast. I think if Baton Rouge can capitalize a little bit more, they can get something going. But for now, Memphis is still the favorite. I think obviously Virginia Beach is going to take the Northeast. Neither of those 3 teams below them have really done too much to separate themselves. I think Columbus, once again, will take the Midwest, but maybe they'll finally lose a game to Iowa, Milwaukee, or Omaha. And then, of course, Southwest is going to be a brutal match. Austin headlining the entire draft. Tucson having a gajillion picks. And Albuquerque, well, you know, they're Albuquerque, you know, so they're there. Then, of course, the West, I think I'll probably once again go with Portland, who just loaded up insanely. Sacramento does have a dark horse chance, though, to give a shot. Those are kind of my picks as now. But like you said, I don't really see any dynasties falling apart. I think San Antonio, Virginia Beach, for the most part, should remain active. Although I think Virginia Beach will have the easier path to remain a dynasty rather than San Antonio. And I think Portland and Memphis will probably be the two biggest teams from each conference to give a shot at it. So that's my opinion. I think we've covered everything, unless you have anything else, Mr. E.
No, I think we'll let the teams kind of speak for themselves with their draft choices in the upcoming games. I know there is a rumored preseason round that may be broadcasted here in the upcoming weeks before the regular season, and perhaps you'll get some more input from Cole and I as the audience listening to this throughout the season on all the goings abouts of the NAGA.
Absolutely, and I think these podcasts will get more exciting, more fun as the season goes on. I think a preseason information dump on a podcast would be very nice. It'd be a look at who the teams are, how they face, and yeah, I hope we continue to do this. I think it's very fun for me. I know Mr. E has also said that you find it fun as well. I think the league also finds it very informative. Sometimes there's owners that don't have a lot of time, and they sometimes just put on a video on in the background while they're cleaning or doing something, and they learn something new every day. So, yeah. So that'll be it for this. This was the podcast for the top 5 winners draft. And of course, if this is a second episode, it is the top 5 losers for the draft. We hope to see you guys next time. And hopefully, the next time we all see you, there will be more owners, more prospects, and more engagement than we already have. More is better, can never have enough. And we will see you all next time. I am Cole. That is Mr. Reed Option. And we'll see you next time.